Brian, I had a lot of fun recording our last week's episode. And there was something about the topic of confidence that I felt, man, I really want to go deeper in. And so today on the Introspection Hour with Brian and Patrick, we wanted to expand and go a little bit deeper on this topic of confidence because we realized our childhood has a huge impact on how confident we are and where we start on that confidence scale. But more importantly, addressing your insecurities is a really good point that we made in our last video. But at the same time, you have to make sure you set yourself up on the right path because your insecurities might mask the actual problem. But we also wanted to kind of give this hope. It's not this doom and gloom. It's not this really hard road. It's a hard road, but there's a concept for us that we realize and experience, which is when you start to build confidence, it's transferable. And so we'll be able to expand a little bit more. But Brian, I wanted to dive a little bit deeper because you shared a lot, but I wanted to share a little bit more on my childhood and even a little bit of a quick reflection on how it impacts me raising my daughter. So Brian, one thing I realized is here's a little bit of a positive story that my mom and dad did. They took me to church every Sunday when I was a little boy, about 5, 6 years old, give or take. And one of the things that I always appreciated was that they really encouraged me to just belt it out. We go to church these days and you're always quiet. I don't like the way my voice sounds. I don't like the way, I can't sing. I don't have a good voice. But at that age, no matter if you can hit the notes or not, singing loudly is cute, right? And it's kind of this confidence builder. And so I really liked that of what my parents did, and that had a really good positive effect on me. The reason I bring that up is because as I'm raising my daughter, who's about 3 right now, she's really into dancing and singing along. And I noticed at the very beginning, she's very shy. And so you have to help build them up with that confidence. And even dancing is something that I'm horrible at, but I just move my body with her because it's fun. And she now has the confidence to just sporadically dance around the living room without music, which is actually really great for me. And it's kind of something that I'm, passing on in a sense of that confidence builder. But I just realized raising kids and children in their early age, you can really influence what you give them confidence on just by opening up a little or being a little bit more free, right? And so Brian, do you have other stories that are a little bit more on that little boy positive confidence builder?
Patrick, the one interesting thing I realized is I don't know if you remember this or not, but let's say you're a 3-year-old, 4-year-old child. I think at that age, most people don't have any self-consciousness or self-awareness of what it is they're doing, right? They're just like, I want to dance, you're going to dance. I want to sing, you're going to sing. You want to climb. So it's like what they call the terrible 2 or terrible 3, where you're just all over the place, right? And your parents are having a hard time constraining and holding you. And at some point, we start becoming more self-aware and more self-conscious of the things that we're doing. And that's when we start inhibiting ourselves. Because I remember when I was in kindergarten, I still remember my first day where I had this cute little Mickey Mouse backpack on. And I'm just like I'm going into class. We were actually outside. And just saying hi to people, saying hi to kids, and just saying, hi, my name is Brian, you want to play with me? Like, do you remember that? Just that innocence of a child. And all of a sudden, we get older, and we start, again, being more self-conscious, more self-aware of, like, what we're not supposed to do. And I think that is a huge confidence defeater. Is that even a word? A defeating of confidence, where you start holding yourself back because you feel like, all of a sudden, you just feel like you can't do certain things because of maybe perhaps, again, what you're saying, environment or your parents, for example, telling you not to do certain things. And I feel like I don't have kids myself, but as a parent, I would really highly encourage my kids to do as much as possible.
And you bring up a good point, because one thing that I remember on the flip side, and not so positive, is that I brought it up before of how I love to play sports, but I'm pretty bad at it. And I only kind of mentioned, from an adult phase. When I was younger as a kid, what I realized in just even this whole introspection analysis that we go through, that for me, my parents didn't encourage anything else outside of recess. So the only basketball I got, even though I told my parents I love it, I had, Michael Jordan, the Chicago Bulls, and the 90s of basketball, one of the greatest eras, it wasn't encouraged. it wasn't in my environment. No sports was in my curriculum, was in my time for a lot of different reasons. Again, we said it before, don't blame your parents, but recognize what was lacking. And I gotta admit, if I had just been enrolled in a summer league, if I had just been given a little bit of pointers from someone other than my friends, I think it would have made a huge difference to me. Whether or not I actually pursued it or I was good at it, it would have been different because I could tell at an early age, I have to be very careful of when I play sports just so I don't get ridiculed, just so I don't get teased on, right? Like I was so worried about getting teased about not being able to play. And that led me to other areas and, it still worked out for me. But man, Brian, I got to tell you, that was when I pretty much felt anxiety as a person for the first time, was when I was going through elementary school into junior high school. I don't think I played any sports in junior high. It was just whatever was a part of gym. I don't think I even got on the basketball courts. And so that just, for whatever reason, had a deep hold on me, even to this day. And so that's kind of why we were bringing this up of like how the environment that you grow up in can have such a profound impact on where you start in building your confidence.
Patrick, so you're bringing up your issues with sports. And I remember, I don't know if I ever told you this before actually. So I was in the Philippines for actually 1 year to try and just live with my family over there overseas. And I tried to get into the 4th or 5th grade class. Before then, I was considered a straight A student, pretty happy, pretty smart kid. Suddenly I'm thrown into an environment where I didn't really know the language. So what my family over there ended up doing was giving me essentially private lessons from this tutor. And the way they teach kids over there is very different from how they teach kids here in America. They would hit you, they would yell at you, and because of that, I had lost my confidence in my ability to feel like I was smart because I couldn't grasp the simple like nursery rhymes of like reading a Chinese like poem book. I told them for some reason I knew how to speak Chinese. I guess trying to be proud, but in reality, I did not know how to read or understand Chinese. And I only lasted about 2 weeks before I lost all confidence that I can't do this anymore. And I felt really stupid afterwards. So I feel like as a parent, if your child is struggling with a specific subject, like I know a lot of times we get frustrated, like, come on, Dan, you should be able to know how to do fractions. It's so easy. Like we should not approach them with that attitude, but rather we should try to help encourage them, say, try and do it try to get them to think in a way where it doesn't feel like their confidence is getting diminished. Right? You want them to try and get that confidence where it's like they figured it out and they feel that like, hey, I can do this. This is great. And I feel like that's how we should approach education with our kids, especially when they're struggling with homework assignments.
No, and you bring up such a great point about how to raise a kid, and I'm constantly checking myself with my daughter because of that. Am I just trying to project and also just have these expectations that have nothing to do with her? It's all my expectations of what I want in my kid. That's just a kind of food for thought, folks. We're not saying we know how you should raise your kid, but just know that for us, this was a pretty big impact. And we could go on and on about the different examples that we had, but there was this concept that Brian brought up off camera about neuroplasticity and how it changes and what changes from childhood to adulthood. Brian, explain that a little bit more.
So there's this concept in neuroscience, it's called neuroplasticity, where the definition means changing at the brain. Neuro is neurons, which is brain. Plasticity means the ability to change. Because I was listening to this fantastic book, it's called Livewired, and I forget who the author is, I'll have to look it up. But it talks about this idea that because our brain is always changing, that means we could always continue to learn new things. Granted, there's a specific window that this author talks about where as we are younger, our brain is still constantly learning and absorbing new things, new experiences, but it doesn't mean that we can't continue throughout our our 70s and 80s like part of our life. And so it's this idea that right now we're talking about confidence. Can I continue to build confidence in the skills and the abilities that I want to improve on? And the answer is yes. But there are some instances where the plasticity also involves this idea of intrinsic motivation. I know we talked about this earlier in one of our previous videos, is that just because we're doing a specific skill doesn't mean we're going to build that skill unless we want it for ourselves. So going back to my previous example of being a better communicator, I wanted to be a better communicator, Pat. my goal at that time was to be a TED Talk speaker, or to at least be on TED Talk, to give forums and seminars on how to be a better person. And my drive was there. So as a result, I put in all of that effort, and therefore my congruency to be a better speaker was there. Because in this specific book, he gave it a specific example. For example, we all know Serena and Venus Williams are the American superstars for tennis. And in this book, the author gave a specific example of a hypothetical brother, and I don't know if they have a brother or not, who was also being forced to play tennis. But because he didn't really have the drive or the motivation to want to play tennis, he didn't really essentially get to the same level as they did because the inherent drive was not there.
And that's such a great concept, this idea of neuroplasticity and just being able to learn. So that gives a little bit of that opening. And one of the other points we also wanted to expand on and talk about is that relates to neuroplasticity from our last episode, is this idea of insecurity and breaking down your insecurities. The thing is, even from personal experience, what we found is that insecurities hide the actual problem. And so where you think you're working towards, changing it and, that motivation to change, it's actually addressing more of a symptom rather than a problem. So one of the common examples that I'll give of this insecurity masking the actual problem, Brian, is that we constantly say we don't like the way we look. And there's a myriad of different ways to change your appearance, hairstyle, your clothes, your physical features. But you even pointed out there's certain things that you just can't change. Even with plastic surgery, certain things that you just can't change without going through aching pain. For the common person, okay? There's certain things that a common person can't change, but someone with a lot of money might have endless plastic surgery or modifications. But let's say you brought up your height, my height. We can't change that. We're not going to spend money on stretching ourselves out or anything like that. We're just going to accept it. But most of the time when you're thinking about your insecurities, I don't like the way I look because I'm short, or I don't like the way I look because I'm not tall enough. I'm just average height. I hate that I'm average height. And so, you start thinking, okay, I need to change something of what I look. And you go, okay, I'm going to lose weight. And yet losing weight is not a problem. It's a symptom. For me, losing weight, I thought was a problem. And in reality, it was, I needed to figure out a way, or I needed to have the will to change what my abilities are, how flexible I am, how strong I am, or what activity I wanted to do. Like I wanted to play golf better. I wanted to play basketball better. At this point, it's just trying to keep up with my daughter. And so losing weight never led me to anything. And it kept bringing my confidence down of anything related to my physical ability.
So Patrick, you actually make a great point about this whole exercise and the whole superficial and how confidence affects physical appearances, for example. I know we talked about my height being one of my biggest demotivators as far as me not having confidence. But the other thing that I forgot to mention is that when I was younger, and I still have this problem now, is I had a lot of acne. So I could totally relate to this whole idea of like superficial appearances not affecting in this case, my confidence and my confidence to interact with other people, particularly with the opposite sex, because I felt like I wasn't attractive enough to even interact or be around by the cute and popular girls in our school. So going back to your example of losing weight, many people, especially because the New Year's is coming, right? We all have this New Year's resolution of let's go and lose some weight, even though gyms are still closed in most counties because of COVID. We want to lose weight because we want to look better for other people. Because we feel like if we lose weight, we look better, that's going to give us that confidence. But the one thing that I always like to mention to other people is that even if you lose weight, you're doing it for the wrong reasons. You should always do these particular changes, these personal development goals for yourself. Again, we talk about the intrinsic motivation. Losing weight just so that other people can accept you is a horrible, and I'm going to say it again, horrible motivator, because that means you are trying to get other people's attention. You're trying to get other people's acceptance and validation. And if you're going to make those changes, you have to understand that you want people to like you for who you are inside. And I know that sounds super cheesy and super corny, but it's actually true. It's like, this is a big thing for me, is like dating women who like me just because I have money. Granted, I don't have money, but it's just always been something that I just never wanted, where I have to pay for every single thing. And if I don't go, if I don't have any money, they're not going to go out with me. And I tell people the same thing as far as like exercising and the whole superficial aspect of how you look, is that you should do it for yourself and not because you want someone to like you.
And losing weight is a really perfect example because it hits everyone, regardless of your body shape or size. Even for me, you only see like the top part of me, but I have a belly. There were things. And losing weight, like you mentioned, Brian, just being for other people, it's horrible because I've started and stopped exercising, diets, whatever, as many as the next person out there that's dealing with it. And I can say that from personal experience, it doesn't work. The other thing that I think is also connected in terms of keeping our confidence down, because when we focus on the wrong insecurity, we don't identify the problem or what we want to change. More importantly, what is it that you want to change? If you're not happy with your weight, you kind of start to fall into a little bit of a depressive state. You start to block people off and then become more lonely. It's kind of self-inflicting. What we even talked about in our other episode that we think is, really linked, is it doesn't let you become your authentic self, the authentic version of yourself. And I think that's what also happened to me personally, is that I always had to find a way to mask my weight, not let it hinder me. And so I always had to act as if I'm someone I'm not. And that just kind of made me less and less authentic. But what it also did was it stopped me from even going down a path where I'm building confidence, where it's being positive and something returning. I'm getting a return on my investment. If you're going to set yourself on one of these paths, you want some sort of return. And if you do it for yourself, you'll get a return on investment for yourself.
Even the people that we know, this is back in, when we were in our high school days, the people who we consider overweight, a lot of them seem confident to me. It's the way you carry yourself, right? So we have this idea that just because you're heavy set or you're not as attractive, it's the way you project and carry yourself that actually exudes this confidence. And I think that's where it's really important for people to realize. The superficial parts may not be as big of a role as you think they are. It's more, again, of how you personally feel about yourself and how you carry yourself, where people will perceive you as being confident.
And so if you're, looking at your list of insecurities and you're like, okay, I really do want to build my confidence, but all your insecurities are superficial, you're going to have to do one of two things. One is go deeper, or if there is an insecurity that is superficial, but you want to change it, see if there's a different motivator, an intrinsic motivation that the byproduct is a positive spin on that particular insecurity. So a byproduct of me becoming more active with my daughter is that I'll probably lose weight. And so just kind of, that's a different way to approach it. And so those are kind of two different ways of approaching insecurities. But one thing that we mentioned in our last episode was looking at all of our insecurities through an objective lens. And that lens and that perspective can actually open up different paths that we can take. So Brian, you kind of brought this concept up. Expand on it a little bit more, this idea of an objective lens.
I think this is very important for a lot of us to consider, is that, for example, let's take the superficial aspect, okay? I'm short, I've always been short, I've always been the shortest person in my class. I should realize that my confidence should not be limited by something that I cannot change. And this goes back with this idea of Stoicism or Stoic philosophy, which is something that honestly, it changed my life. There's a fantastic book, it's called The Obstacle is the Way, written by Ryan Holiday, who kind of emphasizes this concept of Stoic philosophy. And the main tenets of Stoic philosophy is that we should put most of our effort on the things that we do have control versus the things that we don't have control. And I know you've talked about the serenity prayer before, and it's very similar to Stoic philosophy. And the serenity, for those of you who have never heard the serenity prayer before, it basically says this: God grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, courage to change the things that I can, and wisdom to know the difference. And I think that's very, very powerful for basically every single person to learn and understand, is that a lot of times we want to change the things that we feel we can control, but in fact we cannot. So for example, my height, there's nothing I can do at this point. Granted, technically there is. Like wear platform shoes, right? There are certain ways to cheat a little bit, but there are other things that we cannot change. For example, how I look, my physical appearance. I mean, granted, you say plastic surgery, but most people can't do plastic surgery. Therefore, it's not something that I can do. But the things that you can change, like confidence, for example, is, again, objective lens, breaking the things down. What are you not confident in? What are the insecurities that you feel are giving you these insecurities? And for a lot of people, it's communication, right? That was my biggest insecurity, is that I just didn't feel like I was a good communicator. So what do I do objectively is breaking it down. What can I do to improve my communication skills? Therefore, I started learning Toastmasters. I started reading more books on how to be a better communicator, so on and so forth. So going back to your objective lens tenet, it's finding out what your weaknesses are, like we've discussed before, and breaking it down to its smallest and simple components and figuring out ways to improve on those weaknesses.
And I love how you brought up, Stoic philosophy and Stoicism, and even linked with the Serenity Prayer, because it's trying to identify the things you cannot change. And even for me, that was the hardest part. So you look at your insecurities mostly through an unemotional lens. And then if you get through the objective portion, you still have to identify what can you not really change, right? And so knowing that, be like, there's just nothing I can do about that, even though it is the byproduct of so many kind of emotions that I feel, things that make me kind of go, into an unhealthy headspace. I think once you accept what you cannot change, and you switch your mindset, right? You change your mindset. Okay, here's something I can change, and I could grow confident. I could build my confidence in that, and address it, and then it improves certain different insecurities that you were feeling. That actually is really powerful, and it's something that we wanted to make sure everyone knew, which is confidence has a power in and of itself, in that it's transferable, regardless of whether or not you reach your goal. When you start building your confidence and work on it like an ability, for example, I want to play with my daughter more, so I have to be more flexible. I have to run around, jump around, so I'm gonna have to do yoga or whatever to keep up with her, get my endurance up and my energy level up. The byproduct could be losing weight. Even if I don't reach my goal all the way, that journey, building that ability up, actually increases my confidence to, say, perhaps play golf a little bit better, play basketball, get back on the basketball court, shoot the ball around, right? Because at some point I'm going to try to teach my daughter how to play basketball, hopefully, or just even snowboarding, or just any sort of example. But the key thing is that what started is a path to build my confidence in just one thing I can change, just one area that I can change, actually allowed me to do other things. And that builds my confidence and it starts transferring it. It's so powerful, Brian. Like, what is an example that you have of where you were able to transfer your confidence?
So this idea of transference of skill is actually something that I agree with, Pat. You all know my story about how I was a horrible communicator, and I worked on it. I spent the months and the weeks to actually become a better communicator. And my company, for one way or another, I had this experience, I had this opportunity where I emailed my company asking them if they want me to do more back end stuff that I could help them as far as like promoting the company. How can we get more business? And all of a sudden, the director of business development over at our Utah branch came out to visit us here in the state of Washington. And we had a little bit of a discussion. And they asked me if I was willing to try on this new role in terms of being a director of business development here in the state of Washington. Granted, I have no skills in how to do this job at all. I'm a physical therapist, Pat. I don't know anything about business. I don't know anything about how to be a director. But my you want to use the word tenacity from putting myself in a situation where I did not know, or rather I did not have the confidence to communicate with other people, being a good listener, things like that, to suddenly be getting the opportunity to be director of business development. And I realized that the amount of work that I put in myself to be a better communicator, if I put the same amount of effort into this new role that I might be putting myself in the next couple of months, it makes me feel like I could kind of do anything.
Absolutely. And it's actually a really great story that there's another element of the transference of your confidence, which is the role is really attributable to communications, meaning being a director of business development, I can tell you, you need to have good communication skills. If you're not a good communicator, you will not succeed in that role. Listening to others, active listening, being able to respond, make a presentation, do a pitch, right? Shorten your pitch, get your elevator pitch going, approach someone you don't know straight out from the cold. All of those skills are needed for a director of business development. And so, Brian, I mean, for the people that are listening, do you feel like you built those skills up just even on your journey to become a better communicator?
So Patrick, when you say it that way, I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little nervous, and it's this insecurity where I feel like, am I good enough to do this? Oh my God, I have to approach people. I have to give an elevator pitch. Do I even know how to give an elevator pitch? I honestly, I'm gonna tell it right now, I don't have that confidence yet. Right? The biggest keyword is yet, but I know that because again, the things that I have learned over the years, which allowed me to be a better communicator, even through like this podcasting, through these videos that we make week by week. I know that if I put in the right amount of effort and the right amount of time, and two or three, is that having that intrinsic motivation to want me to be a good salesman, lack of a better word, then I know that I can do this job effectively.
Oh, absolutely. And I can even tell you, just even from what I've learned about business development and even doing business development myself, a lot of the skills that you've already built to build your communication skills up and your abilities and the confidence that you have gained, they're going to transfer directly over to this role of director of business development. So, folks, that's really why we kind of wanted to make sure you understood every effort you put in to build your confidence is going to be beneficial to you one way or another, either directly, indirectly, or even some sort of transferable ability, skill, and even a necessarily power source, right? So as Brian mentioned, he was a little bit nervous. He is a little bit nervous, but he has that power source, the confidence power source that he could draw upon. And I think that's why we wanted to really expand a little bit more on confidence, because it's such a large and diverse and convoluted topic that we wanted to just let you know of a few other ways that we've been able to build our confidence. And for more insights like those, just continue to tune in weekly with us at the Introspection Hour with Brian and Patrick. And have a wonderful holiday season, folks.
Merry Christmas, everybody.